Bold and striking art, combined with original writing that you could often mistake for Bungie written lore, the recently released Sword Logic fanzine just really blew me away with like the craft and creativity of the community members involved. And selfishly, to make it a little easier for myself to just revisit again in the future, I wanted to make this video just reading out all the written entries like I'd normally do. But because I also want to showcase the artwork, I'll have to throw in like some commentary as we go through it, just so I can have it like linger on screen for a bit. You can download your own copy of the zine using the link in the description below, but there's quite a lot to cover, so we're just going to get straight into it. And we start with the zine's moderator, Marie, who wrote this introduction. Welcome, O Guardian. Within these pages, we celebrate the Hive, their gods, their lore, and the dark fascination they inspire. This fanzine is a labour of love, crafted by a community of guardians who find beauty in the eerie glow of chitin and runes, the weight of ancient oaths, and the whispers of something deeper. Here, you'll find art, stories, and musings that delve into the Hive's rich mythology, alongside lighter takes and original content that reflect the passion and creativity of our community. Whether you serve the Sword Logic, study the scriptures of the deep, or simply admire the Hive from a safe distance, there's something here for you. Ayat. We start with some artwork from Cocoon Creations, who's drawn the Hive sisters. To me, I see it as like three versions of it. First at the top, you kind of have like their purest representations as their symbols, their kind of logographs, their godhood, essentially. What they eventually have become as Hive gods. And then that next level down, dominating most of the picture, we have them kind of like as they physically are. So Oryx, he appears nice, calm and composed, I like that. Savathun has got her trademark swagger with her claw kind of like raised. And then you got Xivu to his left, who appears a little bit more sort of animated. And finally below, this kind of like shadowy version of them, you have them as they were, as the original Sathona, Orash, and Zero, these kind of like proto-Hive krill people, like huddled together in some kind of conversation. This image of sisterhood goes right back to those very first chapters of the Books of Sorrow. And seeing Zero clutching at Orash here just makes me think of like Season of the Deep, the way that she reacted during the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon. Like how emotional she felt about the loss of Oryx. And I guess it's just been like a real treat to see more of this in-game actually recently with Episode Heresy. So it's a nice thing for us to start, just a reminder that there's these very close-knit relationships that's always been a part of like the Hive plotline, despite all the killing and Sword Logic stuff. Though that said, let's get back to some of the killing and Sword Logic stuff. WaLrice wrote several short poems reflecting on and exploring what it means to be Hive. And the first is called Bottom Feeder. I could rise, but there are also gods in the deep. Why should they not lift me? A spell for summoning yourself. Rip, rip, rip. I am 1,000,000 filaments, O enemy mine. Rip, rip, rip. Do I terrify? They had to pick the worms off me, like sticky pearls. Pick, pick, pick. What 1,000,000 filaments? What one? This one is system. This one is us. What if I left the worms? What nature? I made them. I will keep them. Pick, 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 pick off the worms. Little bits of interface, little scabs you scratch so the blood of you can trade. Which? Carrying around two was simple. What moved forward? when I am a grisly pile of linen rags, a million filaments that didn't used to be me. The next art piece is an illustration of Xivu Arath kneeling in grief before the corpse of Oryx on the sea floor of Titan as we saw it in the Ghosts of the Deep dungeon. It was submitted by Bioluminosity, and I'm a huge fan of Bio's art, and it wasn't a surprise to me to see this piece come out as well as it has done. There's just quite a lot to love, I think. I really like the way that you've got like the light rays that come down the centre that draw our attention to where Xivu's kneeling and to the kind of corpse of Oryx. But obviously they have the effect of helping remind us that we're under the sea. The way that Bio always does like this kind of really fluid motion, you see that with like a lot of the witness stuff that they do. Right here at the top right, works really well to like remind us that we're under this methane ocean right at the bottom of the deep. And we've got lots of little nice things here, like all these little candles, the way that they've been drawn, the little stream like stripping off on the left hand side, the little glint of light coming from that. But I guess like my favourite bit of this is just this composition of like Xivu's wings and the way that they mirror the like rib cage of Oryx. Because if you look at it like from the left and the right hand side, it's kind of actually a bit hard to tell where Xivu's wings end. Like, where does Xivu Arath end and Oryx begin? You know, like, Oryx is dead, and does that mean that a part of Xivu is dead? Is she sharing in that? The only thing that seems to really unite them is this empty, cavernous space between them, where I guess Oryx's big black heart once, you know, like, was once present. I mean, I could easily gush more about this piece and talk about it for ages, but let's keep going. WaLrice provides 2 more poems. The first, Brother Killer, appears to be kind of more Xivu Arathi, and the second, Wormsong, I think is very, very much linked to the art piece that we just saw with Oryx at the bottom of the ocean on Titan. Brother Killer. I heeded a dead worm. All us puppets who stitched our own strings swallowed that maggot. But oh, how I garnished mine in strength from false shapes. In truth, who is judgment? In truth, who is lie? In truth, to whom I was praying past a dead tongue, past a first and final death, a brother's blood that drives me mad. I listened to so many familiars I was stranger to myself. You understand that, don't you? Oh, father mine. Didn't you teach me how to devour myself, to clear the plate for creation? Passive and violent as a parasite? Oblique as a meter which carries a ship into the greedy waves of the sea? What an inheritance, what an extinction, what a sacrament to the sin of selflessness. This is my truth, the imperative inspiration. I was weapon. I was syzygy. I was porn. I was never grief. There was a story I heard from a knight about a sword who broke, whose cries steeped the fetid dirt where it lay buried, remembered by how well it served the hand which held it. Servant, subject, sycophant, only named as long as useful, not forgotten, but not kept. There was a spell on this rock once to remove a worm from a wound. Go out, worm, I commanded you, but I did not shoot the arrow you writhed on. What is my skin without you under it? Blood without you of it? Oh, brother killer mine. Wormsong. I would choose to stay here too. The ablated nerves like roots on the riverbank. A valley floods without them, severing ley lines to selves assigned to worship. What do I owe them? What do you owe her? That can be freedom too. After all, in the depths as I am, liberation looks waterlogged. Amberized, light reaching through warp, I could choose to stay here. I like the new crush of the currents holding me down. Next, we have Alak-Hul, the Lightblade, seated in a thoughtful pose in, I guess, probably the Temple of the Navigator where the eponymous strike takes place. This was done by Gecko, and I really like the little touch, like the little ghost, like Alak-Hul's little hive ghost buddy, just above him. And I guess I'm glad that he's chosen to make Alak-Hul, like, thoughtful, you know? Like, he's gazing into this mirror that appears to show, like, Oryx in his battle with Akka. You know, that's where, like, the statue is in the game. And I do really wonder, like, what Alak-Hul's kind of, like, emotional reaction is to this. Does he look up to Oryx as, like, the paragon of what it means to be Hive? It's interesting because Alak-Hul actually, like, started, like, a little mini rebellion. He actually tried to overthrow Oryx back in, you know, when he was the Darkblade. That's the reason why he's in the Sunless Cells, as I understand it, back in the Strike that I guess is coming back out in Heresy. Next up, something that could have come straight out of a Grimoire anthology. It's a piece Marie titled The Three Fates, which has Savathun, Xivu Arath, and Eris Morn in her Hive God of Vengeance form, sat together with a line of string strung between them. According to a source no less reputable than Wikipedia itself, the Fates are most frequently represented as a trio of goddesses, and they shape the destiny of each human, often expressed in textile metaphors such as spinning fibres into yarn or weaving threads on a loom. How they are depicted here is, like, really interesting to me. I think it's nice to see, like, Eris holding the knife. So her agency over the course of destiny is made pretty explicit here. Like, she could choose to use the knife. She's got the final say, which is nice to see here. She certainly had the final say over Oryx's fate. And Savathun here is seen, you know, very delicately kind of interacting with this thread of fate. She's twisting it into, like, this little bow or maybe a knot or something like that. And again, speaks very much to her character. It's like, that makes sense. The way that she obviously, like, weaves twisty schemes. And then on the right-hand side, like, Xivu is, I don't know, like, to me, it looks like she's just very clumsy. Like, she's made an absolute mess of this thread. Like, it's wrapped around her wrists and her arms, and she does not really appear to be in control of the way things are happening in the way that, say, Savathun and Eris appear to be. Though that is just, like, how I see it. Anyway, it's time to get back to some writing. And Scrimshaw wrote this piece called Mantra, which explores a doubt Oryx once expressed in the Sword Logic. Mantra. It is, on reflection, the perfect scam. Here, falling in righteous battle to the children of a long-forgotten Leviathan, scales fall from your eyes. You see the Sword Logic for what it is. It's a bait star. A noose dangled before the dying like a lifeline to something so much bigger than the miserable existence of a krill. You come to see it, as your life balances on the edge of a blade. Your titanic bulk weathers fusillades of paracausal fire, and you bring your fist down with bitter laughter. It's almost a mantra, a chant raised by a trillions. Every krill from thrall all the way to beloved sibling, singing the same song. Here, staking your claim on existence, you hear it as a dirge. It goes like this. Kill, and in the killing, feed. Feed, and in the feeding, grow. Grow, and in the growing, hunger. Hunger, and in the hunger, kill. It was exactly what you needed, deep in the fundament. A verse to repeat ad infinitum, growing stronger for each telling, for each voice raised in song. From below, looking up into that great and terrible syzygy, it's a sword thrust into the sky. An egg tooth cracking open the world of your birth. A way up and out into a wide world that will learn to fear your name. The sharp gleam is careful obfuscation of the inexorably narrowing spiral that is the sword logic. When you stand alone as a perfect killing machine, made strong by the tithes of untold trillions, the lie reveals itself. You are alive, ending lives to elongate your own. All you ever do is kill. You do not belong here. You have made the universe a place of death. There is still the Tithe. With even Akka, Yule and the others slain, the worm within must feed. This is the truth you have spread across galaxies. You are not the sky, and you do not share. By all means, tear the worm from yourself. You are not the sky, and you do not share. By all means, tear the worm from yourself. Die writhing, clutching it in claws that lack even thrall strength. Prove that it is stronger, and in so doing, join the ranks of unworthy dead. Even with your sisters, you exist in terms of what you can kill. It almost comes as a relief as they finally bring you down. Their frolicking and jubilation as you drift is proof enough that they do not feel the hunger pangs. They stand at the apex and pull each other up. It rings out through the space of your throne with such a clear rightness that you have to think of what would have come to pass if you had proved the sword logic. You see it like a dream. You stand over the shell of the traveller, cracked open like an egg. You loop back around to the beginning of the chant. When everything is that final shape, there is nothing left to feast upon. Oh, certainly you are swollen with light, grown fat on the oak of that most hated enemy. You are strong. But in the growing hunger. Look around you. There is nothing left to kill. It starts so very small. Thralls clawing at each other as the worm ravages their bodies. The violence feeds the worm for a time, but the broods cannot outpace the killing. 10,000 thralls become 5,000. Then a little under 3,000. Then hundreds. Then 2. Then 1. You feel a small pang. Something that has not happened in millennia to a worm glutted on slaughter. The final thrall falls upon an acolyte in desperation. It is slain easily, but the acolyte is wounded. He is easy prey for his fellows, his absence an opening for a wizard scheme. Power vacuums as the courts step over the bodies of their peers. Always seeking more. Whole cabals snuffed out in internecine scrabbling for power. Hungry thralls writ large. It's a philosophy that has been owned to a single, impossibly sharp point across eons. It goes like this. Kill, and in the killing feed. Feed, and in the feeding grow. Grow, and in the growing hunger. Hunger, and in the hunger kill. It's been accelerating for a while now. Challenges are more numerous with no outside prey to contend against. They feast on their fellows because the only other option is to wither and die to a starving worm. They swell like crustaceans in the shell, unable to truly molt and rise larger than before, with you occupying the pinnacle. even the taking won't be a solution. Each snuffed out soul made an extension of yourself is a star going out. A cold cessation of the flow of tribute. When millions of tributaries fed that river, it was unnoticeable. When the Hive number in the hundreds, each kill is a vanishingly brief appeasement of the worm. It would be a lonely peak. But unfortunately, you are decidedly not alone. If you had won the day, you and the worm would have destroyed each other. It would devour you, and in so doing, damn itself to fully embody that cursed philosophy one last time. It, as it always has, goes like this. Kill, and in the killing, feed. Feed, and in the feeding, grow. Grow, and in the growing, hunger. Hunger, and in the end, starve. Ayat. I think it's pretty fitting that the next art piece depicts Oryx in his most triumphant moment as he takes that stand against the worm, his god. This is from VeryRedGir, who reminds us in this composition that it is actually Savathun who put this statue here in her throne world. Savathun is depicted here as kind of grieving, I guess, like she's prostrated before Oryx. Makes me think of like that piece we saw earlier with like VeryRedGir, like again kneeling at the corpse of Oryx. I mean, it's probably kind of hard to let go of someone that you've known for billions of years, or however long the Hive timeline works out. I really like this one because it's quite hard, I think, to actually get the lighting right in like renders like this. But it's come out really well, like everything like sort of stands out properly, and so yeah, a really nice piece from VeryRedGir. And changing mediums, the next piece is from Navenici, who's depicting Zevirath kneeling before like this pool of water. You can see like her hand is reaching towards, I guess, what, like a light at the water surface. And then there are like these taken hands that are reaching out of the water, and she's surrounded by this dark terrain. It's a really, really interesting picture because you've got this dark shadow like that she casts on the water. Its colorings make you think like Taken, like it's again like Taken King, like Oryx. And there is also like another reflection in the water, like just above that kind of shadowy figure is the, I guess you could be the sun, but it also could just be the Traveller. Like, it feels like there's this whole thing going on between, like, the sky behind Zevirath that she's turned her back to, and the deep that calls out to her. And, again, I'm just, like, curious about this whole kind of light, this kind of, like, thing in between. It's obviously something we've explored a lot with, like, the final shape. Like, I could probably keep speculating for a good while, but let's move on, and we'll go on to our next piece of art, which is from Scint, who has Savathun in her throne world, embracing the light as the Traveller appears above her. Savathun has like this really detailed model, and Scint's done like a really great job bringing those details out here. But I think like the main thing, obviously, that I really like is the inclusion of the three figures at the bottom. I actually only recognised the one in the middle, which is Dulinkaru, but a quick trip to Destinypedia helped me recognise that on the left you have Balwer, who was a boss in like the Destiny 1 court of Oryx. And then on the right is Malok, the Destiny 1 strike boss. Savathun actually never ever speaks of her children, which stands like in really stark contrast to, say, Oryx, who this whole section of like the Books of Sorrow where he talks about wanting to have children that he could love and kill and, you know, make them grow strong in the sword logic and all the rest of it. Yeah, I'm just going to say that I think it reflects rather poorly on Savathun. That's all I'll say. Moving on, in a way similar to how Oryx once conjured Savathun back with cunning, by mentioning Dulinkaru, we have conjured Randy, who submitted her here in these striking colours, with the eyes of Savathun watching over her. It's a good partner piece for this next bit of writing that was done by Izzy and Euxiom, which explores what might be happening to Dulinkaru right now, as Canonically speaking, Dulankara is still genuinely being revived after we kill her in the Shattered Throne dungeon every 3-week curse cycle. And a lot has happened since Forsaken. So this next piece, Winding Acumen, does a great job of really digging into that kind of question of how is Dulankara processing what's going on around her with everything that has happened to both Savathun and to Guardians. Winding Acumen. 147 times does Dulankara die. It's not that much of a big deal for a hive. Death is the last part of living, and life is learning to die. Inkaru's part in her mother's scheme requires her to be slain repeatedly, and so she lets herself be slain. Her worm is well fed, and her mother smiles as she drinks of the tribute dripping down like water from the great milling wheel of her scheme. All is well. Her small court works to unravel the Awoken secrets. They scout the ley lines, the seams of the Ascendant Plane. Her dutiful Fatesmiths guard, jest, and keep her sharp. Her favoured, Drachna, gathers the knowledge she cannot. She dies and returns, and dies and returns, like a bead dancing down the spiral of time, ever forward. Some days she tithes love to her mother, and wonders about the meaning behind this rotation. Other days she sits with her Fatesmiths, and listens to their stories, boasts of conquests and duel dares, arguments about everything from music theory to xenolinguistics. Sometimes she proves her point against them in fire and iron. Sometimes Drachna goes to scout the middle worlds, and love is tithed to her in return. She has a lot of time to think between the clockwork regular visits of the Lightbearer, but she does not mind terribly. She has just as much to think about, and more to observe. All is well. On the 31st cycle, the Lightbearer decimates the Taken without light. There is an absence of motion that manifests as crystals where they strike. The deep is there, pulsing underneath, and she wonders if this is how her uncle felt it. The Lightbearer still dies. They struggle with this newfound power. The partner soul still revives them. Lightbearers can reject the sky and still hold it. This is a new development. She has much to consider. On the 59th cycle, her mother, the Witch Queen, dies. At the top of a shattered throne world, Dulankara feels it as a surge of joy and sorrow, a great wave rushing in and permeating her form, marrow deep. The power she tithed to her mother now stops at her. The worm in her gut exults, and she senses the faint presence, focus of the Black Terrace and High War. They too felt the change, and wonder what she will do. Her Fatesmiths crowd together and whisper. Drachna brings the news first. Her mother, the Witch Queen, died, and was reborn under the sky, a gift unprecedented and heresy unspoken. Her courtiers are scattered, and the coven is distant. She has abandoned us, the Fatesmiths argue with each other. She has become the lie, and the wheel of her scheme mills for nothing. If the truth has indeed been denied, was it ever true? This is more than mere heresy. Ayat, the only truth, is that which exists. Inkaru listens to them in silence. She stares out into the sea of screams. Far beyond the grey void, oversouls shudder to accommodate this sudden shift in power. Further yet, her mother's throne world, now closed off, and basked in a different kind of sun, detached from ascendancy as the dreaming city is from time, The might she holds ripples through her like a god wave, and the next time the Lightbearer comes, she makes their not crystals shatter with her will alone. On the 70th cycle, Dulinkaru speaks with the Lightbearer. "Tell me of time," she says. Her fatesmiths close on the intruder, but she gestures for them to stand aside. "Aren't you the one in charge of a time loop curse?" the Lightbearer points out, tension worn as twin to the cloak draped over their back. She can taste the killing intent wafting off them. "Are you really so eager to have death instead of dialogue?" Inkaru cants in her head. "Guardians make their own fate," says the Lightbearer. "The Traveller pulled us from death, and through doing so, from linear time. This is why we can counter the Vex. The same reason you can. Paracausality." Their footing shifts, and she expects them to end the discussion with action. But instead they continue on. If space-time is part of traditional physics, and the sky reaches through time to reverse entropy in its chosen, and the deep allows one to cut through space to arrive elsewhere without the expenditure of energy, it's weirdly similar, isn't it? That is what you call making your own fate? Cutting through time? I guess that depends on how you define fate. The Lightbearer takes a bold step forward, and her fatesmiths rumble in warning. Isn't time also space? In a way. Time is change. Well then, moving through time would be making that change. They are still speaking as fire blazes down from their shoulders, and the next sound is the roar of molten light cutting through chitin and flesh. Inkaru ponders this riddle for 2 cycles and a half. Her first instinct is to scoff at it. There is no such thing as fate. There is only one path, and it is the path that you make. Ayat, it is so not because it should be, but because it is. But the phrase sticks with her. She unravels it dutifully down to its thinnest fibres and then braids them again, reels on different spools, weaves new tapestries and rips them apart. She chews the words over. Nothing is fated, not ahead of time. The universe ticks on towards its grand design, but no one yet knows the shape it will take. Worms eat of the change between these shapes. Anthem anatheme, wondrous and true. The future and the past are insubstantial. There is only that which is. She is still cogitating about this when an eddy in power breaks her focus. A tiny ripple of shock within the steady flow of tribute from her favoured. Awe. Curiosity. When next they meet, Drachna says, "Have you seen what lies beneath the ley lines? It is a twining thing, undulating in the way of worms. It simmers and skitters, almost living, but not alive itself." Drachna pulls the energy forth, and loops it over to Dulinkaru's outstretched claw. It is lighter than quarks, but she can sense its duality. How it could snap apart, instantly brittle, or twist and twine within itself to grow its strength. There is power there, beyond this wisp. But, like all power, if she wants to claim it, it must be done right. The Eternal Return does not do it right. It is humbling to be spun apart from the sheer force of will that the energy itself holds, rapidly overcoming Dulinkaru's own. It is a learning experience. The twining energy of the ley lines is a power she pursues enshrouded. The curse makes this easier, but Dulinkara does not let her guard down. The Hive always seek to outdo each other, Ayat. The High Coven seeks knowledge and secrets as lesser beings struggle for sustenance and procreation. She drifts within her own oversoul, watching the lone island of the dreaming city bobbing on ascendant currents, cut off from reality. The ley lines spread out from it like shimmering gossamer, thin silver threads tugged on by the tide. Distantly, she can feel the worry of her fatesmiths. It is not the usual point of death in the cycle. Underneath, there is the quieter faith of Drachna's Tithe. She does not harbour the same concern as her court. The energy that unspooled her physical form is still buzzing in the back of her mind. It feels strange, phantom-like, as if her body was still there for the power to ripple through. Inkaru decides to take this death as is, an unplanned reprieve. She floats in silence, feeling the gentle tugging of energy passing through her, and once her court summons her back, she emerges feeling more rested than she has in centuries. On the 100th cycle, she studies the ley lines. They are delicate things. She pinches one between her fingertips and presses her will against it, a vice grip where her hands are gentle, and the thread strains and curls, tangling around her claws. She is so strong now, with her mother's power pulsing in her veins, with her court in a constant struggle against the Sky Warriors, with her worm shivering and gnashing its teeth in delight. She could topple planets from the sky. She could assail stars and chain them in like lanterns over the canopy of her throne, put the forges of the Black Terrace to shame with the brightness of their flame. She could take this dead domain that has become her prison, conquer it, and make it her fortress. Isn't that what her mother would have wanted? It is a mark of weakness, and a mark of love, to ask this question. But she does anyway. What would her blasphemous, cryptic, distant mother want her to do? Would she urge her to stick to the plan? Or would she rather see her outgrow its constraints, take the tribute bequeathed to her by her death, and go into the world, shaping everything in her own image? Or... Inkaru looks at her hands, at the lithe green strand around her claws. It is a power like none have wielded before. A power that makes her worm deride, tremble. Where the Taken King's power was will chaining the world into submission, this is harmony. An absolute union of mind and matter, will and world, indivisible like the ascendant plane mirroring physical reality. The perfect deep. She understands now why the worms fear this power. There is no anthem anathema here. There is only what is. Oryx, Ziva-Arath, and Savathun all chose to alter their fates on Fundament. Drachna comforts, brow to brow, once she confides in them. They tested the timid truth and found it a lie. How could it be heresy if you are following in their first steps? And even if it is, the boundaries of orthodoxy have become ever blurrier since her mother turned to the sky, since the lightbearers embraced the stillness of the deep, since Drachna accepted her favour with something that was not cunning, not very Hive at all. If the only truth is that which proves its own existence, What would it make of her reaching for this new power, this deep that is not of the deep, and making it her own? Her worm purrs in warning, but the years in her mother's shadow have taught Inkaru to be bold. She will do as the Guardians do. She will make her own fate. At the start of the 148th cycle, Dual Inkaru floats at the top of her tower, and the tangled nexus of ley lines spreads out before her. A confluence of tributaries flowing far beyond Eleusinia, beyond the Sea of Screams, beyond realms mortal and ascendant alike, to the furthest reaches of the cosmos. She feels their current under her own skin, rushing through the bloodstream and tucking around her worm, until the whole of her is vibrating with the ebb and flow of the tide. The Dreaming City will keep its purity once her ritual is done. The Taken Blights will wink into nothing, the robots retreat into their portals, the Scorn be contained. The Awoken and Hive will mostly live. Behind her, her court stands ready with their weapons held up in tribute. It is a simple matter to snap the curse. It's just another thread, giving under the blade of her will. Inkaru meets Drachna's eyes, narrowed in a smile, and as reality unravels and the change washes in, she smiles back and lets herself be carried by the tide. Our next artwork comes from Nyne, who was a Hive Lightbearer acolyte standing at ease with a hunter, with like the post-final shape traveller hanging in the sky behind them. I'm glad Lucent Hive characters like Luzaku are being introduced, and I do hope we get more interactions with the other Hive Lightbearers in future. I think it'd be pretty cool to have like all three classes represented, the acolyte and the Titan Lucent Hive as well. Just looking at this, like I don't play Hunter very often, so I'm just trying to work out like what the fashion is on this Hunter on the right hand side. I think those are Techian Regalia legs, and I want to say that's Worm Husk's crown, but I don't know what the cloaks and arms are. So if you do, like, feel free to tell me off in the comments for not recognising them. Next, Lazulcatt presents some field notes about hive worms, and I need Bungie just to straight up copy this whole idea and just pump out a whole book of these on all the various kind of critters that we meet in Destiny. Hive worm larvae. These are primarily notes about unpaired worms. Worm larvae are a parasitic species, described as segments of the worm gods, in particular of Zeta. It is yet unknown if these larvae will grow into the larger, more lengthy forms of the worm gods. It may be that worm larvae are a subspecies of different classification of worm. Similar to how bees require royal jelly to become queens, worm larvae may require something similar to become worm gods. Killing and slaughter, basically. Diet. Feed off of power acquired by their host by the Sword Logic. Though it has been recently discovered that the light will also satiate a worm's hunger. Could darkness do the same? Bite marks have begun appearing on the plant in the fluorescent canal. Ghost has noted that unpaired worms do not require tithes to survive. Instead, they have been observed eating flora in their habitat. Hive worm larvae scare easily, and will burrow into the ground as a defense mechanism. Unpaired worms live in communal groups of up to 20 in the inner reaches of hive dwellings, as seen in the Scarlet Keep or the Dreadnought. The appearance of larvae are all quite similar, with plump segmented bodies, 3 abdominal spikes, and 2 spines on their tail. Colouring can differ between locations, particularly the Dreadnought, where worms are far more chitinous and red in colour. Partnered worm larvae inhabit the chest cavity of the hive. Young thrall, well, not thrall yet actually, pupae would be a better word, swallow a worm larvae whole. Abdominal spikes act both as protection and a way of anchoring themselves inside of a host. The next piece is from Plasmometer, which has the Scarlet Keep on the moon as the main body of the image. We have the Earth set just behind it, and the Traveller actually peeking out from above the top of the keep. And it's joined by two panels. One looks like several hive acolytes in some kind of pit, and the other has a hive worm. The panels are linked by this really interesting root or tree-like image, where the worm appears to be to me it looks like a seed, and there's these roots coming off of it that goes up to the hive. Or I guess you could say it works the other way as well, doesn't it? It looks like there's roots coming off the hive going back down or feeding the worm, like the branches of a tree going back down to the roots. It's titled Tithe, so I'm just going to interpret it as a cool visualization of the symbiotic kind of nature of that hive-worm relationship. And as for our next piece, this is another one from Marie. I initially thought this was Ikora, just off the kind of closely shaved head. But I don't think Ikora has these really sick tattoos. Or an Ishtar Academy collection, because that's their logo, I think, just at the bottom of her neck. And it isn't Ikora, it's actually one of Marie's own original characters called Tresh, who I guess in kind of Prison Break meets Memento with the whole Guardian memory loss, has got these both tattoos that are representing, as I understand, her pre-risen Golden Age life and the research that was going on at the Ishtar Academy, and she's trying to use that to discover some of her past. And the glowing hand that she's using to interact with the hive is permanent taken corruption that she's taken on. It's sort of like Sloane, really, I guess, since the Season of the Deep. And it's a pretty cool image, and obviously, I really like this style that kind of reminds me of those anthologies. But it's time for some writing again, and genuinely, if someone told me Seth Dickinson wrote this, I probably wouldn't question it. I think it's that good. This entry from Storm does feel like it's straight out of the Books of Sorrow, and it's called The First Final Worm. Let me congratulate you all. You may be a ragged, sorry group of acolytes, some of you not even with your eyes fully grown. But you have lived a full year from the moment you clawed yourself free of the brood sacks. A year of hunger, growth, and perhaps even the forming of a few wits in your vacant skulls. I am here to shake them loose and see if they can do more than rattle on about food and killing. By now, you must know the littlest fragment of our history, of the pact made with the worm our god, the gifts and secrets they granted, how they cut the first wounds to lead us from our world prison. Can even one of you frail wretches tell me which of the worms we follow is the strongest? Your single year of life should have taught you this at the very least. Honest Yule, who spoke first. A safe answer. At least you've been paying some attention. What of Ire? Reality cleaving to his words to carve out laws? Or Hungry Akka. A clever trap. Most commendable. To deny it would be to deny the power our king commands. If your tongue doesn't kill you, you might even do well. And now that I've said as much, you will have to be even quicker, won't you? All wrong, however. Yes, callow acolyte, even your trick answer. The strongest worm, and the oldest, the one that truly cannot be escaped, even by its kin. We know its name. And its name is time. No? Perhaps you are too young yet to realize it. Even our gods are trapped within the bounds of time's coils. They cannot leap through it as those brittle machines do. Nor would they, for such a victory would be hollow, unmade as soon as it was within our grasp. No, we carve our deeds into Time's hide through struggles and slaughters, and our history is found in these deepest wounds, the scars we have etched into it. Still, the worm heals and grows and devours, and so our wars become stories, our stories myths, our myths an echo. You might think each year, each decade and century and long millennia of our crusade is a step forward. This is a lie, a trap. Why is the future so close and the past so distant? Because time curls inward upon its own tail, until it reaches the end of history and swallows it, grinds it down into void and dust. Each of you, and even I, will one day be only a faded memory, a single faint mark upon it, and then nothing at all. What's this? You all look so discouraged. Does it trouble you so to know that you will be eaten twice over? Time, at least, will leave no messy carcass or spore lying around for others to scavenge. Here is a truth to make the knowing go down more smoothly. Oryx will prevail. We will flend lies from truth as the softest rotting flesh from bone. By sword and teeth and hunger, we will craft the universe a most perfect ending, our first and final gift. Freed from its grasp by rendering reality irreducible, our king will behold the greatest worm in its totality, and cut off its head. In its death throes, it will disgorge its tail, it will flail and unravel, and in its unravelling it will reveal the whole of time from the moment it bit down on the first flicker of consciousness. There, scarred and bleeding, will be the final truth, the only truth. The story of we, the Hive. Live long, little acolytes, and live wisely. You would like to see it for yourself, wouldn't you? The next art submission comes from Zav. It's of the Altar of Reflection kind of area in Savathun's throne world. And I guess it's like a good palate cleanser after all the grim darkness of the Hive that we've had. I remember there was a lot of skepticism in the run-up to Witch Queen, mostly based off like some of the leaks, the infamous like Pastebin leak and all that. That the Hive having the light would make sense. But I think Bungie were able to turn the sentiment around on that, because the Hive having the light has been both just like a really cool thing in game, like it's really fun to like play against the Hive lightbearers, but also just like in the story, in the lore, and again, these kind of like areas that they designed for Witch Queen, taking it just beyond like the idea of like the swamp, like I think are all very nice things to see. But we need to get back to the grim darkness of the Hive. So CrispyOnion has made this cool kind of like diptych of Eris in her regular form at the top, and then Eris in a Hive Guard form at the bottom, being worshipped by her very own acolytes. And it goes alongside this poem from Imonthemoonitsmadeofcheese, and it's called Iconoclasm. Crack through the chitin. Chip off the teeth. What writhes above us, dismember beneath. She who wields those who kill gods as her knives. She who takes vengeance for those who have died. Tear out your worms. Break all the swords. Disrupt the rituals. Alter the wards. Crota has fallen. Oryx is dead. Give her the mantle of all that has bled. She who strikes fear in Xivu or wrath. Haruspex walking the bladed path. Ruin of Savathun, exposer of lies. Blasphemy, heresy, give her your eyes. Many-mouthed hunger, bane of the swarm. We tithe ourselves to Eris Morn. Dredgen Aves is taking full advantage of the kind of like awesome new social spaces that we got in Heresy for these renders. First, it shows this kind of Warlock and Titan pair who I guess were meant to see as like these acolytes perhaps of Eris, visiting Eris's flat, playing with her rock and stuff like that. And then we have them kind of like in reverse. I'm just going to actually rotate this round because the image they've actually put together here is like just really super cool. We've got this Titan with like the Hive shield and the Hive sword, and I like the idea of like that'd be a really cool exotic to have like sword and shield. And then you've got obviously Eris and her new model with the echo of navigation behind her. And then finally on the right, we get a flashback to, I guess that's like the staff from Season of the Haunted, I want to say. It's something like that. But yeah, it's another pretty cool image. And keeping the art going, Celcidia's entry was of like the architecture of Savathun's throne world. I actually really enjoyed the layout of this one as Rhulk's pyramid looms in the background. I think it was probably pretty hard for like Bungie's art team to make a swamp engaging and somehow also refresh the Hive palette for what's probably like the 6th time in Destiny's history, and still have it all feel fresh and original. And the fact that they pulled it off is like a massive testament to their teams, and I appreciate Celcidia for including Rhulk's pyramid, one of my favourite locations in the entire game. And we follow this up with a picture of Oryx by M.E. Wrights. He's stroking like this power pose above the Dreadnought. You got the rings of Saturn behind him. It's really nice to see him like clothed and regal here in his kind of like pre-King's Fall outfit before he like rips it all off and becomes like the Taken version you fight in the King's Fall raid. Yeah, lots of little details here, and I'm pretty sure that's like the location right at the end of the Taken King's campaign where, you know, that whole scene with Eris and the sword where she has a little creepy smile moment. As for our next piece, it's a art and writing combination. So there's some backgrounds. Shadowkeep, I actually think, has some of the best Hive lore in the entire game. Obviously, the Books of Sorrow are iconic, but Inquisition of the Damned and the associated web lore that came out around that time are generally some of like the best Hive writing out there. And Significant Otter, who has done this art to accompany Pathology's story, the 4th Inundation, would really fit right in with all of that work. Just as a quick reminder, because I find this stuff really interesting, in the web lore for Hope, Hashladun recalls a trial her father Crota put her through. It was to be impaled in 6 places to a floodplain in his throne world, and flooded, or inundated as they say, 5 times. Otter's like drawn the progression of the flooding. The first flood of bloodied hydrogen, whatever that is, but it's like unto acid. Then it says that the next one was of fire. The third one is apparently of light. And the 4th inundation is apparently just secret, and that it rattles the bones. And in this artwork, you can see we have Ear-Ute standing over what appears to remain of Hashladun, who's progressively thinning out as she goes through these trials. The 4th Inundation. And so, Hashladun, spawn of Crota, descended to the selective acid. And Ear-Ute, once beloved of Crota, Ear-Ute, who now turned her back on Azavat's attempt to rebuild the choir, descended with her. By way of greeting, Ear-Ute sang necrocy into a slab of Hashladun which was rotting, thus dulling the pain. Hashladun was impaled and bled in 6 places, and her worm raged. She desired power and the love of her father, and feared losing the parts of herself which remained after the first 3 inundations. The sight of a hive of her lineage only partially comforted her. Thus is the power subservient to Oryx, Ear-Ute intoned, not singing. How much greater must his power be? Lost Death Singer, why do you come to me? Crota sent me here to pair my excess alone. Hashladun spoke clearly, the acid not having eaten into her throat. But The scales around her mouth cracked as the words emerged. The inundations are a matter of addition, not subtraction, said Earute, and wrenched away one of the great ribbons of muscle near which Hashladun's arm was pierced. Hashladun knew Earute's words to be a lie, but the inundations had confused her sense of what created pain and what created pleasure. Therefore, she was open to the Death Singer's assertion. This test proves you can overcome the barriers of the flesh, said Earute. My only barrier was the small size of my enemies, which could wriggle through my claws, said Hashladun. A slice of selective acid took a part of her, but because her worm screamed, she did not have a reason for the scream to emerge from her own mouth. Then you are ignorant of the love-hate between the courts, said Earute. She hooked a claw under another ribbon of muscle, and Hashladun bled onto her hands. I left the song to Azavath, because Azavath wishes to conquer the pit. She may succeed, but her ambitions are small. We sing princeling songs when we could cry a queen's chorus. You have seen the Malamu upon him. What is Azavath to this? The words distracted Hashladun from the selective acid reshaping her shoulders. She said, You speak truth, but what is there to be done? I will not turn against Crota's court unless he wills it. You do not have to. Only remember that I appeared to you in your time of confusion, and Azavath did not. Do you hate her so badly? I love the death song so fondly. If Azavath clashes against Crota's power, the knowledge of the song may be lost forever. Azavath builds a chorus in a crater and says the enemy will not bomb that place again. You, meanwhile, will love your place in Crota's court until it hurts you badly enough that you impale yourself on your grief. Earute looked impassively over Hashladun's flayed back to her impaled limbs. I stepped away from my pride of place in Oryx's court in order to preserve what remained of my loyalty. If I had known more about what was happening, I would have left earlier. Hashladun hoped she would never fall so low as to intentionally turn her eyes away from the courts, from the struggle. Still, Earute had once been powerful. If she had thought it the best decision, maybe Hashladun herself could use the same tactics. Another wave of acid swept over her. Parts of her were washed away. She nodded. Earute looked at her once more, defiant, seeing perhaps what the terrible consequences of pushing strong Hashladun would be. She disappeared. Pain blinded Hashladun, and she could not see where the Death Singer had gone. And Hashladun took the memory of Earute's words for herself, to gleefully hide from Azavath. But she also took the memory to forget, like a scrap of meat between teeth is forgotten until it crawls back out of the crevices of the mouth, because the priorities of Hashladun were of the Malamu and the fist. So, to follow, we have a really dark piece from Edgecrusher. It's kind of like the mirror image, perhaps, of when we fight, like, the light-bearing hive. Because this piece shows a knight reaching out for a ghost, doing a sun dance, I guess, as they attempt to revive their slain guardian in the middle of combat. You can see, like, there's, like, blood dripping from the knight's sword. So he's clearly the guy who's, like, taken out this guardian. And it's kind of reaching out for that poor ghost. So who knows how this is meant to play out or end. Probably just a reminder that, yeah, you know, perhaps maybe the Guardians of the Hive are not really that different, considering we don't hesitate at all these days now to crush a Hive Lightbearer's ghost when we fight them. But next piece is actually a bit of writing and art sort of combined together that was done by Izzy. When I got to the end of this one, I actually had to just take a moment just to really let that final panel sink in. Hopefully you get what I mean when we get to it. It's a pretty emotional kind of bit of writing. Power is life, thinks Savathun, hidden inside a black hole. The worm, her god, purrs in assent at this. But the worm, her vanquisher, who knows her secrets, who feeds on her cunning and doubts and the truth she wrestles with to deny, shivers in dread and delight. Isn't this but a different angle to go at the final shape from? She wants to stay alive. She's wanted it so desperately that she was ready to kill her brother in his throne world. And wasn't that worship? Wasn't that the perfect enactment of the logic? Which commands to carve your existence out of every piece of flesh softer than your blade, mortal or cosmic, despised or beloved. Her strength has always lain in her fears, and she is so terrified to die. We also have one final poem from WaLrice. It's called Leviathan-Mine. This fatal logic is all that I could sponge from the damnation you built. This, of being born liminal and indescription. This gift of hunger cursed on the living. Existence, this struggling to exist. I know this as a prayer only from the mouth of a violent observer. A dead planet lies monument to this passivity. Pruning is part of cultivation. Would a gardener leave his flowers to rot under the weight of doomed buds? This is how I know that everything sheds death, a little at a time, and then all at once. This mouth devours me, and so I grow thorns as I slide down its vulnerable throat. This is how I struggle. You would bless me with liberation when what I want is strength. You would make me powerful in your image. Like a whale makes krill into energy for her cells, into excrement. In an empty belly, weren't you also selfish to be born? You know you were. Teeny Beeb submitted an impressionist painting of Oryx at the end of King's Fall. And yep, mission accomplished, I am impressed. Pun intended. And yeah, I just love seeing Destiny rendered in all these different styles. Like, I'd love to see like a cubist version of the Witness, or I would like to, like, one thing I'd love to see is like medieval kind of like woodcut styling of like Vex doing Vexy things, or maybe like Vex just doing sort of like medieval farmery things in that woodcut style. Yeah, just like, as I say, I just really like seeing Destiny rendered in different art styles. And if you come onto this next piece, which is from Starlight Vex, it goes this huge contrast now from what were these like really soft kind of like brush strokes to this really grungy, feverish depiction of Xevious throne room. Just like how it's written in like Sororicide, you've got the walls of like yellow fat, as they call it, you know, and viscera, and you've got kind of like things along the wall, like capillaries, I think is how it's described in the book. You got the fountains like pouring with arterial spray. Like, again, like, I think, you know, considering we've had like the cutscene now, Like, it's easy to imagine like something like this kind of like gory stuff like fitting into that environment. So yeah, nice piece from Starlight. But yeah, we can take a break from some of the dark grunginess of the Hive for some writing from Randy, who wrote a piece involving two of his OCs, in which Haylog12 and Kai-Sorex talk about like Hive culture, and someone can actually correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had this vague recollection that one of the writers said that Luzaku from the Final Shape was actually inspired by Randy's previous work exploring this character, Kai-Sorex, which I think is just like so cool. It's a really real good testament, I think, to how much the community feeds into like Bungie's shaping of destiny in this story. The Cutting Case. The lesson on intersectional strand solar tactics done for the day, Luzaku takes the Exo's hands in hers and bows low to meet her gaze. Thank you, Sec Haylog12. This one grows sharper today. She lets her gaze linger for a moment before relaxing her grip and turning to leave. Kai-Sorex watches the younger wizard drift further away for a time before turning her attention to the Exo, her expression unreadable. She addressed you in the debridative case. I think she might like you. Haylog feigns indifference, in spite of all of the signals currently flooding her exomind and telling her that she in fact would very much be blushing. She rests her chin in her hand and flashes a teasing grin. Oh? And does that upset you? A scraping trill of laughter escapes from the wizard's throat. Why would it? For jealousy? When the fear of loss is allowed to fester, to be made sharp enough to cut both ways? No, I do not fear losing you. Jealousy has not found purchase in these bones. Our bright Luzaku can infatuate herself with you if she is compelled to. Kai-Sorex circles slowly around the warlock, drawing closer. And why shouldn't she? You are strong, beautiful, and curious. You challenge her with your questions, probing and dissecting her preconceptions. A life spent with you would be one of growth, of improvement. Truly, it would be more reasonable to find fault in her behaviour if she didn't find you alluring. Haylog scoffs and leans back into a confident recline. Oh, so that's why the Hive so relentlessly chase me wherever I go. My inquisitive acumen. And here I thought they only wanted to kill me. The wizard floats close, her 3 green eyes level with the blazing blue of the Exos too, and takes Haylog's chin in hand. How very human of you to draw a distinction between the two. She crackles with a playful trill, scraping the claw of her thumb along the worn edge of Haylog's scion cheekbone, and they both smile in their secret ways known only to them. Hidden in the whine of chitin on metal, somewhere, nestled deep in the shrill overtones of that tinny sibilance, the two of them find an ineffable calm that only comes with being deeply, truly in love. You've got me there. I am nothing if not human. Speaking of distinctions, you mentioned Luzaku using a debridative case? Sec, the cutting case. The naming of teachers and mentors, of that which removes the rot of ignorance. The signifier of knives and revelations. It is sometimes also used poetically to describe weapons or those who wield them. Poetically. Haylog sighs in feigned disbelief. She in truth loves Hive poetry. I've also heard you use sen with her. Is that another noun case? My curious and observant warrior scholar. Sen, or the accuminative case, is Sec's counterpart. The case of the sharpened, the learned, that which has been owned, defined by the amelioration it brings upon itself. Halog thinks for a moment, before asking, and what sort of poetic uses does it have? Victims, the wounded, the dead, those defeated in battle, says Kaisurex, ready for the question. Of course. But why have I never heard these signifiers used before? Why is it only Luzaku that seems to use them? Kaisurex's eyes light up in the way that they always do when she is able to indulge Halog's deeper curiosity. Traditionally, it is the remit of children and adolescent Hive, still finding their shape. As you know, knowledge is power, and teaching can be seen as freely giving away power. There is still a strong sentiment among many Hive, especially the more orthodox adherents of the fundamental marginalists, that this is sacrilege, as power should never be given, only taken. Kaisurix rolls her shoulders erratically, a Hive gesture of dismissal, which of course is absurd, because no child would ever survive long enough to learn anything under such pretenses. So instead, there is a cultural imperative to abandon outward requests for the sharing of knowledge as one reaches maturity. Halog furrows her brow. So it's considered childish? Is it not seen as condescending to refer to someone using Sen? Kaisurix settles next to the Exo and wraps an arm around her. Not at all. It is a sign of respect. To ask someone for knowledge, for help, to point at a mountain and say to your companion, "You are stronger than me. Lend me your strength so that I might become strong enough to climb it on my own," is to honour them. Oryx, Savathun, and Zivarath themselves engaged in this sort of collaborative exchange of power long after they left their child morphs. It is how they became so powerful. Kaisurix shakes her head. No, to deny Luzaku the accumulative would in fact represent this base condescension you are wondering about. When given the opportunity to facilitate another's growth so plainly, to deny it, to say unto them, "No, you are not worthy of this knowledge, not capable of this growth, nor shall you climb that mountain," would be a vile insult. Kaisurix lets a thoughtful gaze linger in the general direction Luzaku had gone. Luzaku's use of it is a very loud declaration that she sees herself as unfinished, and still learning. It is a declaration of vulnerability, but also of intent. It is very dangerous for her to do, and very admirable. If she and I were ever to take to nesting, I think I should like to adjoin our roosts. Halog suddenly had many more questions. An impossible, painful length of time ago, on an old beach, glimmering grey by the cold light of 52 moons, Sathona decides that she wants to see her sister smile, so she allows Zero to touch her with the edge of her sword and bring their most recent game of swords and lanterns to a close. The young knight aspirant makes no effort to contain her pride. "This is a good game you have made, sister, because I can win it." Sathona laughs. "Is that the rubric by which my works shall be judged and their worth measured? In that case, a thank you, Sec Zero, for this valuable lesson on virtue." Looking down at the sword in her hands, Zero decides that she wants to be stoic and thoughtful in her victory, to stand in contrast with her sister's inscrutable mirth. But she fails, instead baring her teeth in a childish grin. "Yes, Sen Sathona. The only good war is one you can win, and you should only fight good wars." Sathona looks at her younger sister and smiles. Honest, and loving. The next piece of art comes from Scint, and it pairs up pretty well with their first piece, which, if you remember, that was Savathun with her 3 children, Dulankaru, Balor, or something like that, and Malok. And instead now we get Oryx and his beloved children, Crota, Anuk, and Halak. Sorry, not Chris. It's actually like this really intense image, which the way I read it, it's like you've got Oryx kind of like standing between his children and the witness. You know, all those hands across that sword. And I think that this is like really pretty fitting, because the way I've seen it recently in the lore is that Oryx was very much doing his own kind of separate thing to the witness's own kind of like goals of the final shape. Like, Oryx was never being groomed to be a disciple of the witness. Oryx had his understanding of the final shape from his encounter with the Winnower when he spoke to the deep, and that isn't the same as the witness, as we now know. And sure, whilst some of his parenting choices, like hurling Crota into the Vex network, might be questionable by our standards, you know, from Oryx's perspective, he's just tough love, and I think he was a good dad, wasn't he, Oryx? Now, for this next section, I actually have 2 apologies I need to make. The first is that I won't be reading out Cultural Appropriation by Imonthemoonitsmadeofcheese. Like, please do go read it. The link is in the zine. But I'm just really bad at doing, like, the Drifter's voice. Like, when I do, like, the lore readings, like, it's bad enough then. I cringe when I do it then. But he often doesn't have, like, a lot of dialogue in a lot of the lore books. And to be honest, and it would probably be a bit of a disservice to have Imonthemoon's, like, writing of the Drifter just sound like me, just like some random British guy, because that's not how the Drifter sounds when you read him in your head. The second apology is that the second piece on this list is actually by me. I probably should have mentioned that at the start of the video, but yeah, I've just done this short kind of like this little short poem is my contribution to the fanzine, and that's next. It's called Teox to Her Wards. It was not I who began it. Cast onto hydrogen seas, prey so often, sacrificing for survival, our king's brood ever whining, I was nevertheless not unhappy. Where our court went, I was content to go. I was a neuter, adapted to a punishment, the long life. But Orash, you know, she kept on brooding over our timid truth, our destiny, the whole world's prey. She discovered a flaw in our understanding, and she had to find a way to fix it. For Fundament our world was no refuge, and our king foresaw apocalypse, god wave swift rising. Orash would lead a short, hard life, and didn't want it. She even believed the story of my betrayal. It is hard to compete with the lies. In Kingmorph, Oryx set to work. The universe must be made a new shape, of bladed love and winnowing touch. Ingenious cryptoliths, soul fire engines, sword logic war moons, and abstract means of obliteration, and multiplied opportunities for soul divestment and new forms for Zero and Sathona and the rest of the brood. You can see how his pride had been hurt. In this process, he had to murder everything, because he believed that the path of the deep was the whole secret. He was always a curious child. He got to the very inside of that whole ideology, exclaiming as he went, "So this is how it works. And now that I know how it works, why, I will be its synonym. And as for peace and sky, they cannot be trusted. Existence is the struggle to exist, and everything turns to the deep to survive." You see, he has always been fearful. Yes, he spoke to the deep itself, for whom only a final nothing is dear. And clearly love wouldn't exist. But he refuses to accept the conclusion. You see, he was always an idealist. It was warmer than this on that sea, when King was not taken. I would suggest, for the sake of all children, that it's time you took over. But you are Fundament's daughters. You inherit my own faults. You are most loyal, following Oryx even beyond existence. Faults of character have their own logic, and it always works out. I observe this with Savathun and Xivu Arath. Perhaps the whole elaborate fable, right from the beginning, is meant to demonstrate this. Perhaps it's the whole secret. That nothing exists but our sorrows. At least they can be demonstrated. But it's useless to make such a suggestion to Oryx. He has turned himself into God, who is faultless and doesn't exist. Ode to Xivu Arath. Thou still undissuaded blade of Fundament, thou god of the rotting slain, war-dominant, who canst thus express a rage-fueled intensity more fervent than thine? What idempotent legend haunts behind thy shape? A deity, mortal, or both? You who laid waste in jungles of Torobatl or Old Reese? What lies or weakness are so exposed? What aspect, what mad pursuit, what struggle to escape, what howls and shrieks, all life surcease? Heard melodies are sweet, but those which kill to you are most sweet. Your death songs sing strong, not just piercing to the ear, but listeners unmade, songs to rend the spirit. Arias of no tone, cruel warrior, beneath thine sword, thou canst not leave thy song. Bold knight, never, never canst thou ascend, not while thy flesh from thy bones be unripped. Though tithing beyond thine goal, yet you still grieve your king. Thine thirst cannot be slaked, for ever wilt thou test thy strength, all other aspects stripped. Ah, happy, happy claws that can still shred through viscera and entrails, charnel, sinew. Happy, happy melodist, unwearied, for ever singing death songs ever new. More happy bile, more happy, happy blood, forever warm and still to be enjoyed, forever chanting peration not yet sung, all-edged truth transcendent. Beautiful to know, truth which leaves hearts bifurcated and impaled, burning foreheads and parching tongues. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? Lightbearers and lightless sharpen themselves through you, you who are the whetstone against which they own your blades, sharp enough to kill your brother, Oryx, your sister, Savathun, and yet, blasphemy, blasphemy, they do reject thy brother's throne. Your sister turns to the sky. You are forlorn, and yet from the remnants of these heretics rise one more terrible than all the rest, one who was broken and yet survived, sword dripping, eyes from thine offspring torn, most blasphemous challenge to your pure faith, you who have removed all that can be removed, no longer of light, but darkness, many-mouthed hunger, Her snarling form dost tease you out of thought, challenging eternity. Perversion of your truth, thine brood this generation did waste, yet she remains in midst of other woe, and thou dost fear the sharpness of her words. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know in death, and all ye need to know. Ayat. Ontological substantiation. Cogito ergo morimini. Eris said to a hive that she had left alive. Let us both logic swords. I will contradict you. Come now make your resistance, and challenge existence. Too many have died, proving your logic true. Such a contest, O vengeance, with none else in attendance, with no tithing or knife, would be wasting your breath. I'll be knife, you'll be tithes. Eris flashed her 3 eyes. With my wrath and my will, I disprove you to death. As we approach the end of the zine, the tone's going to lighten up a little bit from here on out. And Rogue of Art sets the tone with the Drifter sneaking up on Eris in a Festival of the Lost costume as a Lucent Hunter. I mean, I love the shuttlecocks and all the little tape. I love Eris's little hiss. I love Imaro getting closed shut in the book. Just really cute little scene. And kind of sticking with the Drifter kind of thing. Hex the Vex has done some Drifters cooking. We've got this Cajun Hive Worm Alfredo instructions. I'm trying to imagine what you would use as the Hive Worm for the as a substitute. I guess you would maybe something like tenderloin of pork or something might work, though I don't know how you'd get it green. But the drink sounds nice, which is this Cursed Thrall cocktail. One of the other highlights of this piece is just all the cute little doodles that's been scribbled all over the page, from the cheeky little worms to the little confused hive thrall. And Art Lieber wraps up the whole art section with this really cute scene of a hive lightbearer meeting some new Ark and Void moth buddies. Courtesy of that distant hunter at the top, who I guess is using moth keeper wraps. Again, I don't really play hunter, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that's what's going on here. And again, I think it's kind of a clever, cute idea to think how would they react? How do they react in lore to seeing the void version of the lucid moths sort of flying towards them? And yeah, I like the idea here, which is that they would all be friends in an ideal world. And that's it. If you've listened up to this point and enjoyed any of the writing or artwork from this zine, I do really encourage you to go tell the original creators wherever you can find them on their socials, which are all listed in the zine. I want to thank Destiny Music Archive as well for some of the music I've used in the background. And I'll actually finish with Marie's closing words, as she's way more articulate than I am. And so, our journey through the dark beauty of the Hive comes to an end. This fanzine is a testimony to the passion, creativity, and dedication of an incredible community, and we want to extend our sincerest thanks to every artist, writer, and contributor who brought their vision to life within these pages. To our readers, to the devs, thank you for delving into the deep with us. Whether you came seeking knowledge, inspiration, or simply a place to celebrate your love for the Hive, we hope you found something here that resonated with you. Your enthusiasm fuels the heart of this community, and we are honoured to share this incredible journey together. Keep creating, keep exploring, and above all, keep listening to the whispers. We'll see you in the deep. Aya.